Thank you very much. Thanks for the introduction and thank you for inviting me, mainly Laura. Thank you. I'll try and keep time so that we have some time for the questions for the excellent speakers that preceded me as well. And somehow it feels like this is a bit of a wrapping up one, going all the way from what Jens was talking about this morning to some of the tracking mechanisms or methods that we've been talking about lately. I'll start off by thanking all my co-workers, both at the Swedish School of Sport and Health Sciences, at the Karolinska Institute, but also the Swedish Royal University of Technological University. I'd like to start off with one of these earlier papers that Jan just mentioned, looking at why I'm interested in this. Some previous measurements that we've been doing, looking at mainly asymmetrical loading within the Achilles tendon. Then some validation studies and displacement, speckle tracking displacement studies that we're doing, looking at the accuracy evaluation. Basically, this picture won't come up too often, but this is what we're looking at all the time, where we have something that's familiar to all of you. We have the Achilles tendon in an ultrasound image. We have these kernels, segments that we put in the speckle tracking program, and the posterior, anterior, proximal, distal parts of the Achilles tendon. So this is one of the papers that Jan was mentioning. What I did was a very crude study, now when you look back on it. This was in the late 90s, where I was looking at the asymmetrical loading in the Achilles tendon. I had a cadaver foot placed in an Instron materials testing machine. I had connections to the three muscles that I could pull on. And by pulling on them differently and splitting the Achilles tendon mechanically, so I actually cut down it, with two strain gauges attached to it, we could see that there were significant differences in the medial and lateral parts of the Achilles tendon depending on how you pulled on these muscles. So quite simple, bit of a playing around sort of experiment, but really fascinating to see the differences that we saw. Then let us go further and want to see why or what possibilities there are of this asymmetrical loading. Previous to this, I hadn't seen anything saying that it's not just one force vector that's going through the Achilles tendon. And methods that were available were either in vivo, which meant that we had to put things into the tendon, or mathematical models. And some of the in vivo methods that I was inspired by were, for example, the buccal transducer that Pavel Kormi in Uvascular had used, or what Jens also showed earlier, the optic fiber method. You can maybe see that there's an optic fiber going through the tendon here, and through calibration techniques we could calculate different loading in the tendon depending on different knee angles, and therefore with a model decide that there was some asymmetrical loading going on, so different loading in different parts of the tendon. Some of the work by Åsa Sjöberg, PhD student, who will be happy to answer all your questions on any of this work later. She also looked at the optic method, looking at different orthoses and different orthosis settings and what the loading in the Achilles tendons were depending on them. What was interesting there was that, counterintuitive maybe, the rehabilitation setting that you often use first after Achilles tendon rupture and ensuing operation is the 20-degree plantar flexion setting in an orthosis. And what we found is not significant, but there was actually a trend that had the highest load in the Achilles tendon, which then decreased with the later protocol steps. So there was something happening in the Achilles tendon that we just didn't understand at that stage. I then met Mikael Persson at Karolinska Institute, and he, for the first time, showed me this method that he called speckle tracking. I had never seen this before, and he just showed me two images that I thought were really fascinating. He placed this region of interest in a dorsoventral position in the tendon and showed me that after a contraction it moved in this manner, which clearly indicated, completely non-scientifically, but it showed that the dorsal area had moved little and the deeper area had moved a lot. And that just indicated to me that here there might be a non-invasive method that we could use for measuring this. I was at the Department of Orthopedic Surgery at that stage, and what was important for us was that it's a method that was commercially available and in clinical use for the people that are working in the hospital setting. As I'm sure a lot of you know, Echopac is actually more for echocardiography, and we wanted to see if this was applicable to tendon and muscles as well. we got excited straight away, and the first thing we wanted to do was walking. We thought, okay, we'll just go straight into walking. So we did. And we got some data. This hasn't been published. We saw for one subject a very large standard deviation in the, this wasn't actually a displacement curve. We took the green and the yellow speckles and subtracted. So it's a sort of an indication of strain that we calculated here. And we saw that this strain measurement that we had during walking and also the related EMG activity of the muscles. If you can maybe remember this little curve here for a future slide. When we saw that there was a bit of a problem with the walking, we decided that you should back a bit, retreat a little bit, and do an evaluation of the strain in Echopac. So we did an experimental setup here, where we had the tendon phantom as one of the options. We had a human tendon allograft from an amputated leg. We managed to get this. The material was in an materials testing machine again, and we could have the ultrasound probe on the material and then pull on the Instron machine and calculate with speckle tracking to see how it correlated. Here you see the three treatments we had. We had the phantom, which somebody just mentioned, always this beautiful picture, obviously. We had porcine tendons, and then we had the human allograft to look at. If we once again look at the phantom first, you can see wonderful following of the Instron pattern with the allograft. This curve is the input curve that we had on the Instron, and it comes from the walking data that I showed just before. So it's actually a simulation of the walking curve programmed into the Instron machine. And like I mentioned, you can see that the Echopac speckle tracking curve followed it precisely. We also compared two frame rates. We had a 39 Hertz frame rate and the double. We had 78 Hertz frame rate, and two sizes of the region of interest, the 22mm region of interest and 11mm. These two we found were the best combination. So we actually found that the lower frame rate had better results than the higher frame rate. The other results showed that in three porcine tendons that we had, you can see that some followed them better, porcine tendon 1 and 3, whereas there's some where it went pretty haywire and didn't really follow very well at all. The human allograft, which is maybe the most interesting, also followed it pretty well. We, as a limitation of the study here, we compared to what was programmed into the Instron. But what was programmed into the Instron doesn't necessarily mean that doesn't happen in the tendon, because the tendon has elastic properties, so it might actually be doing something else. So it is possible that the Echopac actually followed the real movement of the tendon better than these indicate. But we realized that, once again, we've maybe been a bit optimistic by going into Echopac strain, so we retreated even more and started looking at displacement. A lot of the measurements we do are on an isokinetic dynamometer with an ultrasound probe, obviously, on the Achilles tendon. And in this case, we looked at what we just saw recently in a biodex with a passive movement of the ankle joint. And what we could see was by placing the region of interest superficially and deeply, we could see that it's probably very hard for you to see, but that there's actually a greater displacement, and that's been shown in a lot of presentations today, in the deeper regions than in the more superficial regions. And at that stage, I think that was still not quite accepted, because it was really hard to get that published. People didn't understand and couldn't really believe that it was like that. So it was quite fascinating to get that one published in the end. We've got some videos as well. You have to be really quick, because when they start, it stops pretty quickly as well. But I've got, this one's even better. But basically, that's the region of interest in both the superficial and the deep area. And if you look closely, you can see that it's not only the strain of the whole region of interest getting longer, but the whole thing is actually also moving. So that's the difference between the displacement and the strain measurements that we're doing. And what we saw, as I mentioned, is that in the deep region, the mean for all the subjects that we had the displacement was greater than for the superficial area. But that's not anything new anymore after today. We also did a reliability study with both intra and inter-rated reliability and found that they were both excellent. I don't think the reliability is actually a problem with Echopac or Speckle tracking. You can go back and do the same measurement again, and generally I think you'll end up with pretty good repeatability. And we also had a mean intra-class correlation coefficient that was quite high. In some more recent work, which got submitted today, we once again looked at porcine feet in the flexor digitorum tendon. In the tendon we have a metal plate, which is not this big white thing here, but it's actually the little thing that you can see underneath. The white thing is the region of interest that we placed in the tendon. Once again we had the ultrasound on there, and we had an attachment to the tendon going over a pulley system into the instrument machine again, so it could pull on the tendon. And we then had 3 displacements, 5, 10 and 15 millimeter displacements at 5, 10 and 15 millimeters per second, which is a similar protocol which had been published by Costagna previously, so we wanted to simulate what they had done. What we saw was that at the different displacements and different velocities and 2 different tendons, we for one tendon got really good coefficients of variation, that is quite low, whereas the other one for some of the conditions actually had quite high ones. So even here, even in the displacement accuracy, we found some problems in the variability of the data. However, if we looked at the correlations of the data to the instrument data, we found that the correlation coefficients were extremely high and very significant for all of them. So this is for the 2 tendons, at the 3 different speeds, and the manual tracking displacement, which could be done on the metal plate. I forgot to mention that. There was a metal plate that we were following manually compared to the Speckle tracking, which was calculated by an in-house Speckle tracking algorithm. The Speckle tracking data is on the y-axis, and as you can see, the correlations were very high. Let's finish off with some quick summaries. We feel that Speckle tracking has a potential to non-invasively quantify differences in displacement and strain in different portions of the tendon, but I don't think we're quite there yet, especially with the strain part of it. The Echopac strain validation indicated difficulties in the biological material. The phantom was perfect, but we had a lot more variation in the biological material. The displacement accuracy evaluation showed really high correlations to manual measurement, but there was a systematic underestimation, which is something that has been published previously by, for example, Laura as well. That it's a systematic underestimation through the Speckle tracking. But it does clearly demonstrate differential dynamics in the tendon, which show the potential of non-invasively, in a good way, for clinical purposes also, to be able to show this, what I've been for many years trying to do. That's it. Thank you very much.